What if the maid in your house carried a secret your wife never told you? And what if the answer to why your son laughed for the first time in 2 years wasn't joy, but truth buried in silence? Richard Callahan never asked those questions until he opened the door too early, too fast, and saw something that ripped open his world. The night began with convenience. It ended with a wound money could never heal. The billionaire wasn't supposed to be home yet. His jet touched down early, a storm cutting short a meeting that could have made him millions. He entered his Manhattan penthouse quietly, the marble floors echoing under his steps. No one knew he was there. For Richard, surprises were weapons in business, never in family. But halfway up the staircase, he stopped cold. A sound reached him he thought was gone forever, his son's laughter. Ethan hadn't laughed like that since his mother died. For 2 years, silence had been his language. The sound of that laughter clawed at Richard's chest. Who had pulled it out of him? He crept closer, heart pounding. Then came another voice, a woman's, low, accented, weaving words like a lullaby. He recognized it instantly. Maria, the maid. She was supposed to scrub, polish, and vanish into the background. But what Richard heard now was intimacy. It was dangerous. He shoved Ethan's door wide open. The sight struck him like a blade. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, a photo album stretched across his lap. Maria sat beside him, shoulder brushing his, her hand guiding his small fingers across pictures. Ethan leaned against her, smiling, as if she were not staff but blood. Richard's chest exploded with fury. His son was supposed to need him, not her. His late wife's memory was supposed to belong to him, not the maid. The roar came before thought. What the hell is this? Richard's voice cracked through the air like lightning. Ethan flinched, the album tumbling to the floor. Maria didn't move. She stayed seated, her arms still hovering near the boy. That single act, protective calm, fueled Richard's rage further. You think you can touch my son? Replace his mother? You're the help, Maria. You clean. You serve. You do not sit here like you belong. And you never, ever lay hands on my son. Ethan's eyes welled. His lip trembled. But it wasn't Maria who broke. It was him. Dad, stop. The boy's voice cracked through the storm, small but sharp, trembling but strong. Richard froze, startled by the defiance. His son wasn't cowering. He was crying out, "She's not replacing Mom. She was showing me things about her, things you never do." The words struck like knives. Maria rose, steady as stone. Her voice carried the fire of someone who had swallowed too much silence. "I knew your wife, Mr. Callahan, long before you did." The room collapsed into silence. Richard's breath caught. Ethan gasped, clutching Maria's hand. The statement was a grenade thrown into a palace. Richard's eyes narrowed, searching her face for cracks. But Maria didn't falter. She took a step forward, her voice cutting through the static. She was my friend. The only friend I had when the world spat at me for the color of my skin. When others shoved me aside, she stood by me. She gave me dignity when no one else would. Richard's throat closed. The image of his late wife, her kindness, her fierce courage, flickered in his memory. Could this maid be telling the truth? His mind screamed denial, but Maria's eyes carried the same light his wife once had. And when she died, Maria continued, her voice trembling, I promised myself I'd protect Ethan if I ever had the chance. Not for money, not for favor, for love, because she once saved me. And this is how I repay her. Richard staggered back, fists trembling at his sides. Prejudice gnawed at him. How could his wife, his perfect, untouchable wife, have hidden such a bond from him? How could she have loved someone he barely acknowledged? He wanted to dismiss it as lies. But Ethan's face told another story. The boy's tears weren't fear. They were disappointment. For the first time, Richard saw himself through his son's eyes. A man who had money, but not love, power, but not truth. Maria's words echoed, each syllable striking deeper than any boardroom insult. Your wife believed love had no walls, but you built them so high your son is trapped inside. Richard turned away, pacing like a lion caged by his own past. His empire meant nothing here. His skyscrapers, his fortune, his name, none could fix the fracture in this room. Thunder rolled outside, the city storm mirroring the war inside him. Richard Callahan had walked into a secret that refused to stay buried. And in that secret was the one truth that could either save his son or cost him everything. Richard's knuckles pressed white against the doorframe as thunder rattled the sky. Every instinct in him screamed to reassert control, to remind everyone in that room who owned the marble floors and glass ceilings they stood beneath. But for the first time in years, his voice faltered. You knew my wife. The words weren't thunder now. They were a whisper, half disbelief, half a plea. Maria nodded, her eyes heavy with truths long carried. Ethan clung tighter to her arm, his small voice breaking through the tension. She tells me about Mom, Dad, stuff you never do. That accusation struck harder than Maria's confession. Richard prided himself on never bending, never breaking in the face of competition. Yet here, in his own home, a 10-year-old boy shattered him with words sharper than any deal gone bad. He saw it now. The photo album, Ethan's tears, Maria's calm defiance. All of it painted him not as a father, but as a warden, guarding his grief so fiercely he'd starve his son of it. And underneath, another wound festered, prejudice. His chest burned at the thought that his wife's love had been wider than his own. Maria's voice pierced the silence again, steady but trembling with memory. Your wife saved me the day I was denied work because of my skin. She spoke up when everyone else turned their backs. She called me sister when the world called me less. Do you understand what that means, Mr. Callahan? She trusted me. She believed in me. And I swore if I could ever give something back, I would. Her words hung heavy, daring him to deny them. But even denial felt hollow now. Richard's pride clawed at his throat. Billionaires did not bend to maids. They did not accept servants as equals. And yet his wife had. The woman he had idolized, grieved, built shrines to in silence. She found kinship in Maria, not in the circles of wealth and power he had surrounded her with. Was it possible he had never truly known his wife at all? A surge of rage and sorrow welled within him. Why didn't she tell me? His voice cracked. Why hide this from me? Maria stepped closer, her tone sharp but compassionate, like a teacher scolding a stubborn child. Because you wouldn't have listened. You wouldn't have believed. Not then. The sting of truth slapped him harder than any insult. Ethan's trembling voice rose again, fragile but determined. Dad, I like when she tells me about Mom. I finally feel like I remember her too. Why are you mad about that? The boy's innocence burned through layers of prejudice Richard had wrapped himself in. He wanted to answer, but no words came. For a long, suffocating moment, no one moved. The storm outside pounded against the windows, as if demanding a choice. Richard's empire had taught him one rule: control the narrative, or the narrative controls you. But in this room, control was slipping, and for the first time, he wondered if that was a gift rather than a curse. Maria bent down, picking up the photo album, her hand steady as she placed it gently back in Ethan's lap. This is your story, too, she whispered to the boy. Then she looked up at Richard, her gaze fierce. And it's time you remembered it. Richard's mind reeled. Every boardroom conquest, every skyscraper he owned, every power play he had mastered, none mattered here. The only empire that mattered was the one sitting cross-legged on the floor, clutching a photo album. Ethan didn't need a tycoon. He needed a father. But could man so steeped in arrogance and prejudice change? Could he unlearn the walls he had built? His hands trembled as he took a step forward, his voice breaking. Ethan, I didn't know how. The words were jagged, clumsy, but real. I didn't know how to keep her alive for you. Ethan's eyes widened, surprise flickering across his tear-stained cheeks. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't money. It was honesty. Maria's gaze softened too, though her spine stayed straight. Then learn, she said simply. Start here. Start now. The simplicity of it disarmed him. For decades, Richard had believed change came through domination, through strategy. Yet here, in the quiet of a child's bedroom, change asked for nothing but humility. And humility was the one currency he had never spent. For a moment, Richard stood frozen, caught between old instincts and new possibilities. Then slowly, almost awkwardly, he lowered himself to the carpet beside his son. His expensive suit creased, his polished shoes scuffed against the rug, but he didn't care. Ethan's eyes lit up in shock as his father sat beside him. Richard's fingers brushed the photo album, trembling as they turned a page. The face of his wife stared back at him, smiling. A lump rose in his throat. She loved this picture, he whispered, voice breaking. Ethan leaned closer, tears glistening again. But these were different, softer, hopeful. Maria stepped back, silent, watching the moment unfold. It wasn't her place anymore. It never truly had been. Her role had always been to bridge a gap, to honor a promise. But as Richard and Ethan leaned together over the album, she realized her promise was no longer to the dead, but to the living. Richard glanced up at her, his eyes wet, his pride crumbling. For the first time, he saw not a maid, but the keeper of his wife's truth. Stay, he whispered. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. The storm outside eased, the thunder fading into a soft drizzle against the glass. Inside, another storm had passed, leaving behind something raw, something fragile, but something new. Richard Callahan, billionaire and tycoon, had been forced to face the walls he built around his heart. And in tearing them down, he discovered something his fortune could never buy, the chance to be a father again. Ethan clutched the photo album, his small voice breaking the silence one last time. Maybe we can remember her together. Richard nodded, his hand tightening around his son's shoulder, his voice trembling with a vow he had never spoken before. Together. And in that single word, the wound began to heal.